Erev Tov Sderot. Good morning in Phoenix. My name is Wayne Firestone on behalf of the America-Israel Friendship League. It's my pleasure to invite everyone into this wonderful community building exercise that we do on our webinar series. Here we are in September, and September begins with new possibilities of renewal. And indeed, each September, at least for the past couple of decades, we've had to sort of reconcile with the challenges of 9/11. And that indeed is our focus today, the legacy and the resilience that has happened after 9/11. And you're going to hear some fascinating perspectives today from our panelists from very, very different places that were affected by 9/11. We're going to look at, as a retrospect, indeed, the resilience of New York and what that meant as a symbol for people around the world. So first, let's start with a community building moment for everybody here in our Zoom community. What is different about this fall that you're looking forward to in this coming year, with, for some of you, the high holiday season coming, for others just looking out at the beginning of fall and the light getting a little bit darker? We want to look for symbols of hope. We want to look at the resilience that each of us has had to go through during this period in order to get through the various challenges that we've all faced. So let us know where you're calling in from today. Put something in the chat. Tell us something that you're looking forward to about this fall, perhaps that wasn't in place last fall. We have someone calling in from Connecticut here on the water, and just enjoying some peaceful sunny day. So we'll take that as a good opening for our segment today. I'm going to start now down in DC with Congressman Carolyn Maloney, who represents New York's 12th congressional district. She's been in Congress since 1992. She's the co-founder of the House's 9/11 Commission caucus that led to the passage of legislation on the 9/11 Commission, and indeed went on to do some of the most important comprehensive work about recovery in many, many different sectors affecting America, including comprehensive intelligence gathering legislation that took place. We are also celebrating the victory of Congressman Maloney's bill itself that focus specifically on healthcare and compensation. That act, which has meant extremely important resources to first responders and their families. We're going to be hearing about it. I could tell you lots of things about Congressman Maloney, but perhaps of most interest and least well known is that she has a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo, which I feel for Congress,
you know that?
It may be one of the most important sort of achievements to have if you serve in Congressman. Congressman Maloney, thanks for being with us. We know we only have you for a short time, but wanted to hear a little bit from your perspective of the work that you've done on this important topic.
Well, I want to thank you so much for inviting me. It's good to see so many good friends on the web today. And thank you to the American Israel Friendship League for convening this opportunity to speak to each other about this important event. This year marks 21 years since the horrific attacks on 9/11, but some days it feels just like yesterday. And I just went to a remembrance at the 9/11 site with the vice president, was part of her motorcade, and saw many of you there. I saw Rabbi Postasnik there and many others. And I always think that I can get over 9/11, but it's always a wrenching emotional experience to go there and see so many people that lost loved ones and many people who are still sick because of their work on the pile. And as I remember, you asked for my remembrance on September 11th, I was in Washington, D.C. preparing for a markup on a bipartisan financial services committee bill. And my husband called me and told me that he thought there was a terrorism attack on the towers. He was a pilot, so he understood. He said the plane was flying too low. It's not a normal plane. This is an attack. And my office was saying, oh, no, don't be ridiculous. It's not an attack. Shortly thereafter, the second plane went in, and you knew it was an attack. Two planes flying in was just you knew it was an attack. And I'd also, they didn't know what was happening, and the press was reporting that a helicopter had crashed on the Pentagon, and that there was a crash there. But I looked out my window, I could see the Pentagon, and it wasn't a helicopter crash. It was billows of large amounts of smoke. And I said, gosh, this is an attack. I called the committee, said I wasn't coming. I told my office to evacuate, which even before they told us to, I said, let's get out of here. It's an attack. We went downstairs, got in a car, and started driving back to New York. I'll never forget the ride back to New York because no one knew what was happening. Press later told me they were on the plane with the president, and they were announcing the president is here, the president is there, when he wasn't. He was up in the sky flying around because they really didn't know what was going on with what had happened at the Pentagon and at the towers. And I'll never forget, as I got closer to New York, there were signs up everywhere, which were horrifying to me, saying New York destroyed, a crisis area, no one can enter. And truly the only time that I have used my congressional ID that it was worth anything is I could get through all the blockades. I could get through all the blockades. Like, Congresswoman, I got to get home to my district. And after a while, it was really eerie because all you saw on the street, they were deserted completely, no cars, except for police and fire coming in from neighboring states to help, and construction workers going in with equipment to help remove debris at the site. And by evening, when I got home, the streets were deserted. Those of you who live in New York know the streets of New York are never deserted. But that night, no one was on the streets. And I had this yearning to go to the subway station. I love infrastructure. It's like the heart of the city. And I went to the 86th Street station that I always caught my ride to work, and the subway was running, and that made me feel better. But I went back to my home, and everybody was in my vestibule wanting to volunteer, wanting to do things. So we went down to Ground Zero, and they had blown up the command center, which was at Ground Zero. So the command center was moved to One Police Plaza. We went to One Police Plaza, and I went in there, and they had this room. They had the chairs all the way around the room. They had the head of police, fire, the mayor, a head of rebuilding, construction, you name it. Everybody was there. I just walked in. I said, what do you need? They said, we need phones. The communication system's out. Can you get us some phones from DC? So I went home and I called where do you get phones? I called the military, asked them for phones, and I got the head of the Bill Young, who was the head of the Defense Committee, to help me get phones, and we shipped them down to New York. These walkie-talkies that worked. It's interesting that all the phones were out except for one of the phones. It was and they made us all convert to that particular phone because it had worked during 9/11. But in any event, we started rebuilding almost immediately. Everybody was rushing down, and quickly, I do want to note that Israel was one of the first countries to respond to try to help us. They may have been the absolute first one to come in with supplies and with help, and really reaching out to be helpful in any way they could to us. We lost nearly 3,000 people that day, but in the more than 21 years since the attack, the death toll continues to climb because of people who were exposed to, worked at the site, and came ill because of the deadly toxins that were there. According to a recent report from the FDNY's World Trade Center, and I know Rabbi Postasnik is their religious leader. He may have better statistics, but they told me that nearly 75% of the FDNY workers on the pile at Ground Zero now have some sort of long-term illnesses linked to their exposure to the toxic air. And now we're seeing more and more cancers that are coming out. It took a time for them, and that's why we need more funding for the program to really help everyone who was there. In the days and weeks that followed, we pledged to never forget and to honor those who we lost, and to always be there for our first responders and survivors who suffered because of the attacks. I have never in my time in Congress seen Congress so united and determined as it was around 9/11. It was truly bipartisan. I formed a bipartisan caucus to work on the issues of 9/11. And one of the things we did is that we authored a 9/11 commission caucus and also legislation to create a commission, bipartisan, to report back on what happened. It was truly bipartisan. Tom Keene, a former governor from New Jersey, a Republican, was co-chaired with Representative Hamilton, chairman of the Defense Committee at the time. And they came back with a important report. We had to fight to get it funded. We had to fight to give them subpoena power. We had to fight to give them as much time as they wanted. No one wanted them to look at the mistakes that were made by whom or why it had happened. But I think it's one of the strengths of our democracy that we had this report, that we were strong enough to fund it and have a honest report back to us on what happened. The report basically said it was an intelligence failure, that our intelligence system did not spot it. We now have an intelligence committee. They keep asking me to go on it, but I never go on it because you can't talk about what you do. My constituents want to know what I'm doing. So I couldn't be on that committee. But now we spend a tremendous amount of money on intelligence, and it has helped us. The police department tells me there have been numerous attempts to attack us since then on our airplanes and other areas. And because of our intelligence, our underground and others, we've been able to thwart it. But we came back with a report with roughly 51 recommendations, and Congress quickly acted to implement all of them, most of them. And it called for a new Department of Homeland Security. It called on taking all of our intelligence organizations and unifying them under one umbrella, sharing information. We learned that we couldn't rely on Washington. On that fateful day, it was our police and fire and volunteers on the ground that were there helping people, not Washington. It was our people. And so they have these terrorism watch groups that are across the country now, involving people from the ground up to the federal government on ways to protect us. But one of the areas that we did not get funding for was the healthcare for our 9/11 responders. And I took that as a personal crusade to get them their healthcare and compensation. They risked their lives to save others' lives, and we could do the same. We had to do the same for them. The Victims' Compensation Fund provides compensation for any individual or representative of a deceased individual who suffered physical harm or was killed as a result of 9/11 or debris removal efforts. And our country said we're never going to forget. Well, let's pass legislation and take care of people. And until you do that, you are forgetting. So finally, over the years, it was 18 years before we made it into an entitlement. An entitlement is that it was there for the lives of the people that were there. It's the only one in history that has been written by an individual, me. The others are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, major legislation. This was written as an entitlement for the men and women, volunteers, and others that worked on the ground. One of the things that our opponents tried to say is that it was a New York problem. No one else should help us. And I worked hard to make it a national problem. We were attacked as a country. We were attacked New York as part of our country. And we really worked hard to show that every single congressional district in the country, believe it or not, only one did not have one person that was working on ground zero. The whole world responded and tried to help us rebuild. Passing the bill was very difficult. It took a big effort from the responders and survivors walking the halls of Congress to break the filibuster. But in the end, we did it, and President Obama signed it to law, the Health and Compensation Act of 2010. Unfortunately, this has not been the only time that 9/11 responders have had to walk the walls of Congress. In 2015, I authored and passed the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Reauthorization Act. At first, the city of New York would not acknowledge that our police and fire and others were dying because of 9/11. They denied it. And the first person who was tied to it was James Zadroga in New Jersey. A doctor said he died because of 9/11. And it was terrible. The city tried to make him into a dope addict and said it was his dope. Well, if he was taking any dope, it was because he was in so much pain from all of his injuries from 9/11.
Congressman Maloney, I just I wanted to jump in on that point, that the last point that you made, that really obviously the New Yorkers who were there that day are will be affected the rest of their lives, and the important legislation that you help ensure passage over many years will now be a legacy for them. But indeed, this was an event that the whole world sort of experienced on multiple levels, and people from different parts of the world were there that day, different parts of America, and that's largely what we're exploring today. I think it's fair to say, again, with many thanks for your multiple fronts of service and leadership on this particular issue, and the help in rebuilding and resilience for New York, and for all of humanity. We thank you for being with us today and sharing those both personal and professional reflections from 9/11. I want to actually now tee up a short little video clip that we're going to show and introduce our next speaker on the panel, Tal Carrot. Tal is the president of Silverstein Properties. And if you think of any iconic image of both the destruction from 9/11 as well as the rebirth from 9/11, it is indeed the World Trade Center. And so we are so pleased to have Tal representing Silverstein Properties, which will be our honoree at the America-Israel Friendship League at the Partner for Democracy Awards. A little plug for that on November 7th at the Pierre, where we honor really contributions to the America-Israel relationship that spanned the decades. And indeed, we're so grateful to have you here. I know from your background that you've spent time at a place close to my heart, getting a degree from Tel Aviv University in math and computer science. And a little birdie whispered in my ear that you are also a black belt in jiu-jitsu and an instructor in Krav Maga. So we may actually invite you back in that second capacity, because we have hosted a very popular Krav Maga series in spite of my limited abilities to facilitate someone in the United States and Israel teaching Krav Maga. Today, we've got you in a suit and tie. We want to first share an image of renewal that we think will really set the right tone for this webinar. And then we'll ask you, Tal, then to comment a little bit wearing your suit and tie, not your Krav Maga outfit today. Okay, let's cue up that video now. So when you talk about a video image that requires no narration, I sort of think this one really fits the bill. I know you're sitting in your office now in the World Trade Center, and you got a big smile on your face. Tell us a little bit about what this clip means to you, and what the future looks like for Manhattan with a World Trade Center with its new signature on the Manhattan skyline.
Thank you, Wayne. Can you hear me okay?
Great.
Terrific. So also would love to thank the Congresswoman. I think it's terrific that there were people that jumped and helped and were involved and are still involved in helping the rebuilding. If I take a step back to the day, I'm not sure that everybody knows all the details, so I'll be brief, but we bought the World Trade Center about exactly 7 weeks prior to 9/11 on July 24th, 2001, which was my birthday, with the hope and belief that life is great. This was the biggest transaction at the time in the US in the real estate, and my father-in-law and mother-in-law thought that they were going to sail on their boat and enjoy life and obviously work, but less intensely than before, because they've achieved a lot in their life until that moment. And that morning, my wife, we used to live in Scarsdale. My wife was trying a driver. We moved the offices downtown to the World Trade after the closing of the transaction, to the 88th floor at the North Tower, and she was looking to come to the office. It took her through a train about 1 hour and 20 minutes from Scarsdale to the Grand Central, and then a train. And her father asked her to try a driver. His name was actually Israel, very apropos for this conversation. And he was late. Some Israelis are at times late, not always, but he was not Israeli. That was his name. He couldn't find the house for 45 minutes, and that caused her to be late to the office. Otherwise, she would have been in the building. And she witnessed this from the West Side Highway, how everything shut down, the traffic stopped, the buildings were hit by a plane. At the beginning, nobody knew really what it was. My father-in-law that morning, every day he would be at the restaurant at the top of the building called the Windows of the World at the top. But that morning he had a doctor's appointment and he wanted to cancel it. Just my mother-in-law, Clara, said, that's not going to happen. You're coming with me, go and cancel your meetings. And that saved his life. That's something he taught me many years ago about the concept of yes, dear, which works, at least in our family, usually in one direction, but it saved his life, and he keeps on doing this, saying yes, dear, ever since, and I'm doing the same. By the way, my wife works right behind this wall, so I'm at my office, my wife is at that office, so we live together, work together, do everything together, which is terrific. She's the vice chairman and will take her father's place soon. So he's at 91 years old, still comes to the office. We were all in shock, devastation. We lost employees, we lost a lot of friends. And we didn't know what to do. We had to make a decision, and dealing with 22 insurance companies that I don't know if any of you have the experience, but in our case, the insurance companies knew very well how to collect money, but we're not very happy to pay. But we had to deal with that. We had to deal with, first and foremost, with people and lives lost, and making decisions of how can everybody recover the best way possible and be respectful to the people who lost someone, a loved one, to the community, to downtown New York that everybody believed will never come back. to the city of New York and to the country. And the decision at the end was that we have to rebuild. We will not leave a hole in the ground, and we will have to put back something that is the best we can, that will help the community recover and do it at the best way we know how to do what we do. What cost us at the beginning $3.25 billion to acquire is costing around $25 billion to rebuild now. We have buildings that are up. We have still 2 more buildings to go. One is 2 World Trade, and one is a new building that we actually recently won the rights to rebuild, which is 5 World Trade. It was outside of the complex itself, the 16 acres, and that would be a residential and office mixed-use project downtown, which we hope the community will come together to agree on what exactly will be there. It's going to be a mix of multifamily and affordable housing and some office component at the base and retail. But from our standpoint, the concept of rebuilding and bringing back something that will help the community was the most important thing. We focused on building the community the right way. We focused on the memorial, which was a very important thing, and it was designed by Michael Arad and his gentleman that you may all know, his parents from Israel, and it was terrific. And we had to work with a lot of creative and designers and architects, 7 Pritzker Prize winning architects, with each one to design a different building. Each one of them with an ego slightly taller than the building we were designing. And we had to get them all to work together, which was a huge effort, because each one of them believes they know best, and they designed the best buildings before. We put them all. Larry insisted that they will all sit on the 10th floor of 7 World Trade that we had the unfortunate opportunity to build twice. We built it the first time. It also collapsed at 9/11, though nobody perished in that building. It collapsed in the late afternoon. And once we rebuilt it, we put all the architects for the rest of the site on the 10th floor and asked them to work together. Not an easy thing. And we met with them every day until we started rebuilding the entire complex. So from our standpoint, I think the Congresswoman mentioned the concept of never giving up. I actually have a plaque in my office sitting behind me that I have, my father-in-law has, and we have at home, that the saying of Churchill of never, never, never give up. That's kind of one of our mottos here. We won't give up, we didn't give up, and we don't plan to ever give up. Otherwise, you fail before you even started. The community downtown, I think now is more vibrant than ever. People love downtown more than they love anywhere else. We decided to move our family as a commitment to downtown. We built, we saw that there are not enough hotels and high quality residential, so we built the Four Seasons Hotel and Residences a block and a half away. We moved our family, and Larry and Clara moved their lives from Midtown. He said, too many old people, let's come to downtown. He wants to be with the young ones. He's the youngest 91-year-old I know. And we lived within the community, and we're working with the community. So now the community since then more than tripled and is growing. And I think it's becoming a vibrant, exciting place for living and working and enjoying life. That's the best place in New York, to my opinion.
Well, Tal, thanks for those images, those family reflections, as well as reflections from literally from your office and your wife's office behind you. I feel like she's got your back, and indeed, really a powerful statement from your family about where you see the future of yourselves and your community. And we thank you for sharing those reflections. We'll hear some more about it in the discussion. and then at the celebration in the fall for Partners for Democracy. We're delighted today to have a longtime friend of AIFL in Israel, the Commissioner Salvatore Cassano. He's actually a 44-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department, the 32nd Commissioner of the New York City Fire Department. You get, I guess, the title of Commissioner for life, even if it's former. St. John's threw on a doctorate and JD at some point as well. So we could call you a doctor, a lawyer. We could call you a lot of different things today, but your enduring smile and grace and strength over these decades really speaks so largely about who you are and who you represent. And I know we were talking about it beforehand, that every September now you have other roles that you have to play as well, as some of those first responders who have fallen to injuries or illnesses largely that happened after their service. And so maybe you could share a little bit with us about what this particular September is like, but that role that you're playing as a fiduciary, as a representative of the first responders, firefighters in particular, but all of the first responders who continue to have needs, and some of which were frankly not recognized for many years.
Sure. Thank you, Wayne. First of all, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Maloney for her tireless efforts to make sure that our first responders are taken care of and their families. And to Tal, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work that your family has done to rebuild the World Trade Center. I think it was extremely important to send a message to the people that tried to take it down that we would never, ever relinquish to the terrorists in this world. And it's built bigger and better and stronger than ever. And I think that sends a message to everybody. I know it does to the first responder community that you could try to take us down, but you're not. And like you said, never, never, never give up. So, we in September, around the September 11th events, we pay our respects at the World Trade Center site on that day. We stay with our families. We visit firehouses. We show support for the members that were on the job, but probably 75% of our members now have come on after September 11th. And I think that just shows the resiliency of the department and the city and the country, that people are willing to come back to a department that suffered tremendous losses. 343 members were killed on September 11th. And as you just mentioned, since September 11th, we have lost 299 more of our members through their work at the World Trade Center, whether it was a cancer or a lung issue or many other types of diseases that they contracted because of their work, because we swore that we would never forget. And by never forgetting, that meant we had to do a lot of work to ensure that. And unfortunately, many of our members are paying the price for it now. Now, this afternoon, there is a memorial service at our headquarters that is going to commemorate 37 members that have passed away in the last year due to their work at the World Trade Center. Their families will be there. Their firehouses will be there. The commissioner and the chief of the department will be there, saying some nice words to the families to say, we recognize the loss of your loved one, but we recognize that your loss is still going to continue now that you're here, and we're never going to forget you. We are part of your family. You're part of our family. It sends out a strong message. When I came on the job as a firefighter in 1969, the first thing I was told was, if something happens to you, your family will be taken care of. And that was a relief to me to know that I could go to work, dangerous job, extremely dangerous job, even more dangerous today than it was then, and know that if something happened to me, my family would be taken care of. And as I rose through the ranks, I made sure that was to always take place. It's going on till this very day, and it's going to go on for as long as the New York City Fire Department is here. We will take care of our families. So today, the service is in recognition of the people that have passed away due to their illnesses since September 11th, and there's 37 of them this year.
But before we move on, I just want to bring up a picture of you from that period of 9/11 and just this is another recent recipient of a Partner for Democracy Award, obviously President Bush. What were you thinking at this moment now when you look back, some 21 years ago? Could you even imagine the enormity of the challenges, or were you just obviously so overwhelmed with what the immediacy of your needs were at the time? What are your reflections on this moment now, 21 years later?
Well, I would tell you, Wayne, President Bush visited us on September 14th. So the emotions were raw with all of us. We had been there around the clock. We were beaten up. We were battered. When he came on the site, and he just rejuvenated everybody. His presence there to show his support for us meant so much. It gave us a shot in the arm to continue to do our work. We knew the department had to be rebuilt, the city had to be rebuilt, and the country had to be rebuilt. This attack wasn't only on New York, it was on our democracy. And we know we had a big responsibility to ensure that we show resiliency to come back as a department in the city to show an example for the rest of the country. And we did, thanks to the president's first visit there. He visited many more times. We met many times in private. He became a friend. I look up to him dearly because he meant such a big, big thing to us at that time. And, the enormity of it, we knew. It's just a matter of how were we going to do it? And we had a plan in place. Helping us with McKinsey came and helped us with it. And it took us years, but this department today and this city is better prepared and better equipped and better trained to handle any event that will come our way. And, the lessons learned from September 11th helped us to ensure that.
It's so, first of all, just again, I can't leave this part of the panel without just thanking you for your service and your commitment over these long years. It's really such a tribute to the grit of New York, which needs to be celebrated as well. The ability to get through tough times. It is perhaps one of the things that Israelis and Americans, I think, share as a common value, and maybe for later we could talk more about those common values and what it means when a friend is suffering or challenged or harmed. That's certainly something I think all of us have learned about wherever we live during this period of COVID, given the challenges. But perhaps no one in the Jewish community has been more inspirational and more of a beacon of possibility between communities than our next panelist, Rabbi Joe Potasnik. He keeps us light, but he keeps us on our toes. We've asked him to do pretty much everything at the America-Israel Friendship League over the years. We've not asked him to do a Krav Maga instruction yet. So, we still have a few more potential Ask Joe that may come. Rabbi Potasnik's the executive vice president of the New York Board of Rabbis. He's the chaplain of the New York City Fire Department. He's been around the block a few times on some of the most important issues, not only that New Yorkers have confronted, but indeed that the multi-faith community has needed to come together and overcome whatever differences or concerns that they had. So Rabbi Potasnik, we're past September 11th this year. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about as we begin and head into a high holiday season?
Wayne, firstly, thank you for the invitation, and it's a great honor to be with someone. I was telling people the other day that we shouldn't wait till the end of a letter to say, love you, miss you. We should say it at the very beginning. I'm a great, great chassid. I'm a devotee of Carolyn Maloney. The fact that she had to fight for the Zadroga bill is a sad commentary, but she's a relentless fighter who's passionate about important causes, and we are the beneficiaries of her commitment. You mentioned that Commissioner Cassano was respected not only here, but in Israel. And I want you to know, Wayne, that he's been knighted. He's been given the Hebrew name of Shmuel. When you ask people in Israel, oh, Shmuel Cassano, they know. Salvatore Cassano here in New York. And Tal, I live in Midtown. So after hearing that's for the older people, I'm now considering moving into your building. Hopefully, thanks to you, as soon as possible. Let me say this. I listened to the various conversations that were very, very moving and meaningful. And I thought that the number 2 is very important. If you look at the Talmud, Jewish commentary on the Torah, it begins on page 2. There's no page 1. If you look at the first letter of the Torah, it begins with the second letter of the alphabet, page 2. What does that say to us? As Elie Wiesel taught us, in life, when you're born, you begin. But sometimes you'll learn, have to learn, how to begin again. And that's what I think Commissioner Cassano, through his extraordinary leadership, and so many others, began again. I heard something the other day as I was standing with the commissioner that was very impactful. Someone said, we talk about them as heroes. And years ago, was a first deputy fire commissioner, Bill Feehan, who said they became heroes not when they saved lives, they became heroes when they first took the oath of office and said they want to serve as first responders. That's an act of heroism. So here we are beginning again with another year. And in the spirit of September 11th, we do that by standing together. I've come to learn from the days since September 11th that this was our tragedy. When those bodies came out of those buildings and we offered prayers, we didn't know what religion was. It didn't matter what the religion was. We saw a child of God, and they'd be there arm in arm and saying that we're all with the same spiritual birth certificate. Years ago, used to say on a ticket, no good if detached. We're at our best when we are attached to each other. And so it was a tragic day. It was a triumphal day because it reminded us how dependent we are, how we need each other for strength and support if we are going to, as we did, begin again.
Well, thank you for both speaking to the need for the optimism or chutzpah that that it takes to come back from such a makkah, such a hit that you take. Tal, I want to, there's a question that came from presumably one of the New Yorkers on the call asking about the buildings around World Trade Center. You made a reference to 2 of them that are still in construction. Robin's asking why are most of the buildings not complete? And I sort of feel like there's a second part of this discussion, which we need to get at, with what happened with the pandemic and sort of the hit that New York commercial real estate and real estate in general took. How have you been able to maintain this level? I get the not give up, but this has been a rough ride by any definition here.
Sure. Let me try and unpack the question because there were a few questions in one. First, majority of the buildings are rebuilt already. Mm-hmm. So originally at 9/11, if we all remember, and just to refresh the memory, there were the Twin Towers, 2 large buildings. There was a retail podium, and there was a building to the north called 7 World Trade, which we built the original one. The Twin Towers collapsed, the retail got destroyed, and the 7 World Trade got destroyed, and some buildings next in the vicinity were impacted. One of them was the Deutsche Bank building to the south, where a 5th Tower 5, which is 5 World Trade, will eventually be rebuilt. During the the design and construction of the place, we had to decide on several items. One, we didn't want to build where people lost their lives. We didn't want to build on the footprints of the towers. And over there is the memorial itself, the reflecting pools. And if someone did not visit, I urge you to visit and see them. It's a very impactful experience with the names of the people who lost loved ones engraved around the pools. We actually hired anybody that had a person they lost in their life and wanted to work for us. And we have people working here. They walk down, like we have a lady from marketing, they would walk down, put their hand on the names of their family members and come up to the office. They're doing this for the last 21 or 20. Well, actually, they've been with us maybe for 20 years. They've been doing this since the memorial was built. So well over a decade. Then we built, there is the Memorial Museum. I saw someone writing a question about a tribute place, which was a temporary place that was not related to us and not involved with us. Some people collected items and put it in a vacant retail space, and that was closed. But the Memorial Museum was built, and it's 2/3 below ground. It's beautiful, and it's a place to reflect. And I've been there a few times. I recommend for people to visit. And then the buildings around which are rebuilt. So you can see them. You can see 7 World Trade, the new 7 World Trade, which is great. And you can see 4 World Trade, designed by Fumihiko Maki, beautiful building that is designed like a katana, a Japanese sword, folded 300 times. And it's a building that at some angles, when you go around the island, disappears in the skyline with the reflections. You have 3 World Trade designed much like a soldier with a rifle on one shoulder, so the shoulder is higher, looking down at the memorial. And you have 1 World Trade, which is with the symbolic height of 1776. So you can imagine July 4th, 1776, where the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And it's all a very symbolic site, but yet it has to be a lively place, a place where people want to be, want to work, want to enjoy and build a community. And we focus on what does it mean to build a community. Today, it's probably the most lively community in the city with the top tech companies, media companies, and creative. We have programs for artists. We help the art community a lot, and it's doing very well. So I hope I answered part of the question.
You even did a bonus by getting to the question about the memorial. So we appreciate that. And it's actually a good segue to what I wanted to ask the commissioner and Rabbi Potasnik about is the telling of this story now to other generations, to future generations. And normally we say this is a topic for educators and educators to embrace what it means to talk about the unimaginable. We're now reaching a point where there are people who were not alive, younger generations, or could not fathom, where their parents didn't let them look at the television images, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm curious, both of you have spoken to so many different members of the community, to policymakers, to government officials, to the media, et cetera, but I'm curious a little bit about your impressions about what's working and what are you hearing from and seeing. What are your impressions about how younger people are understanding or not understanding the magnanimity of this story? Commissioner, I'll start with you, and then Rabbi Potasnik.
Sure, Wayne. I think it's extremely important that our young men and women, our children, learn about what happened on September 11th, the events that led up to it, what happened on that day, how we've rebuilt the city in the years that have taken place. You learn from history. And if you don't teach people about history, they're never going to understand what happened. I'm on the board of directors, executive board of a terrific charity, Tunnel to Towers Foundation. And they just put out a September 11th Institute, a curriculum from K to 12 that they're going to try to get to the rest of the country. Naturally, Department of Education will have to approve all of it, but it's been written by some of our family members that suffered losses. And it's a firsthand experience of what they went through. There's some testimonials on there about the experiences that we all faced. And I think it's important to get that out to the rest of the country. So we're working on it. New Jersey has some school districts already with a curriculum about September 11th and history of it. And we're trying to get that out there even more and more. I mean, what better place than New York to have a curriculum about September 11th? I mean, it's where it happened. So we have to teach that. Yep.
No, that's a great aspiration. Actually, I'm going to ask you all to think about what is it on the wish list that we want for the future of this. Rabbi Potasnik, we have, I don't think it's an embarrassing picture, but rather we do have some embarrassing pictures in our archives that we're saving for the appropriate moments. But this is one, I think, among many that you probably are very proud of, not because it was an easy moment, but in thinking about talking with younger generations about this issue. We have a picture of you we'll bring up here, and I would like to get your long view on this, because you've been doing it for a long time, and I'm curious to hear what you think young people were thinking then. If you just look at their gestures and their faces holding up these photos of destruction, and what their understanding and perspective is today based on your conversations in the communities.
Thank you. Wayne, you know, in Jewish tradition, we have a memorial service called Yizkor, remembrance. And the translation of the word is, may he remember, may God remember. In Yiddish, when we talk about that service, it's masker sein. Means I have to remember. And I think one of the things we have learned, certainly those who were involved in the efforts on September 11th, is that remembrance comes with responsibility. It's not enough to look back at the past. We have to say, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? And also to pay tribute to those who gave their lives to save lives. They cannot be forgotten. We made that promise, and we're keeping that promise. And one of the things that you've done so well at AIFL is you've involved young people. And I think with the internet, the fact that we're a global community, people around the world can see what happened here. They see tragedies that happened elsewhere. And we say, you know, you never stand so tall as when you stoop to help a child. Well, we have to do what we can to make sure that their world is one that they will not have to experience a September 11th. I married the Lairfields shortly before September the 11th. The young Lairfield girl was born. Some 9-10 months later, she never met her father. She carries his picture wherever she goes. I officiated her bat mitzvah. There was her father's picture. We got to show those pictures to everyone. We owe them because they were there for us. You know, I said to some people recently, I met a woman who was saved by members of FDNY. And I said, what did you say when you saw them? She said, I said to them, I knew you'd come. Stories have to be told and retold. And also, we have to work together, people of all faiths, one family, to see to it that we build a place that is sacred and safe. We don't have to worry about these tragedies. That's a long-term assignment, but it's something we have to take seriously each and every day.
Long-term assignment. All right, let's take that up. I'm going to give each of you just a minute or so. Let's go out a decade, 10 years from now. How will we know if we've done this right? Give us just one example of something we're currently doing, or what will it look like, 10 years from now, around your offices, Tal? How will we know that we've told this story right, and that we've learned the important lessons of 9/11, transmitting them for future generations?
I think this connects to the country and state of Israel. And I think you said I studied at Tel Aviv University, but I was born in Israel and lived until after my military service. It's the same in Israel. And when you ask yourself in Israel, what does it mean that you were successful? It's keep on living a happy, productive, and successful life, have a community that is vibrant, people who are together and that are not afraid. And if we let fear and terror affect us, they win. And if we don't, I think the world wins. And our job is to ask ourselves, what do we want to leave behind, and do the best we can to get to the best results. That's my life. That's my belief and my mission. And if we can leave behind us something we are proud of for our children and grandchildren. I have a grandchild now who is 5 months old. I want him to be proud, and I want him to be happy and not afraid.
Commissioner or Shmuel or Dr. Casano, wearing whichever hat you want, what would you like to leave behind?
Well, 10 years from now, I hope we're having the same conversation about not forgetting what happened on that day, on September 11, 2001, and that it has spurred us on to be as better prepared than we have ever been. We do not let our guard down. And as Tal said, we have to live our lives. And by doing that, by preparing and by remembering, we'll be able to live our lives to the fullest.
Rabbi Potasnik, last word.
You said you can go 3 days without food, 3 days without water, but you can't go 3 days without hope. My hope is that the next generation, to echo the sentiments that have been expressed, will be able to look at the tragedy of yesterday and still realize that there is a hopeful tomorrow. In Hebrew, we say, Yesh tikva la'atid. There's hope for the future. That, I hope, is the legacy that we transmit. We went from horror to hope. We stopped and we began again. That's the message for today and tomorrow.
Yeah, let's not go 3 days without hope. Let's not go 3 minutes without hope. And let's certainly leave that legacy for our children and our grandchildren. And indeed, what we heard about today in an hour, what a rich discussion that is hopeful, and without ducking the hard issues of just how difficult this work was for everyone involved. And thank you for sharing those insights. I want to invite everyone here to come back to our next scheduled program on our webinar. You don't have to wait. You do have to wait 3 days, but you don't have to be. This could be your hope that for the weekend. On Sunday, we have a golden program about Golda Meir. Now, some of you think you know everything about Golda and you've seen her bust in Times Square, but did you know that there is a Golda Museum in Denver, Colorado, dedicated to her legacy and the period of time she lived there? Okay, everybody knows about Milwaukee, but did you know about Denver? Well, whether you did or you didn't, you better prepare yourself. There's a big film coming out with Helen Mirren playing Golda, and make sure you do your homework before that by coming to our webinar this coming Sunday, where we will go out live to Denver and learn about the Golda House there that was physically moved to a different venue, and we'll be talking with some of our friends out in the Mile High City about this incredible rededication of the Golda Meir Museum in Denver. So for now, I want to thank all of our panelists for being with us today, and have everyone have a hopeful few days and a week and a holiday season. And greetings from all of us, and a special shout out to our New York colleagues, Cassia and Raquel, who work in the New York offices of 9/11, and I know felt that this episode in particular was a very important and meaningful one for us to do. So thank you for all your efforts and all the work that we do in the New York area as well with our friends and partners. Lahitro, goodbye, everybody.